Hi guys, and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we're going to have a quick look at the different ammunition types. We're not going to go into loads of detail, after all it is just the basics. I will do a more advanced guide covering overmatching and normalization and other such more complex things in the future. So we're just going to have a very quick look at the different types of ammunition. I'm going to explain quickly what they can be used for, and this is really for people that are new to the game or maybe been playing it for a short while and still not quite sure. And then I couldn't leave you a day without any gameplay footage, so I have got a quick replay coming up at the end for you as well. So we'll start off with armour piercing, which is your general sort of all-purpose round that you have on nearly every tank in the game. Not quite all, some are slightly different. So these will either penetrate or they will bounce. When you shoot at a target, you will reach a penetration range, a penetration figure within the range that you can see there on screen, and if it penetrates it will do the damage shown on screen as well. So somewhere roughly in between that. When you're looking at a tank in the garage and it gives you the penetration value as a solid number for your armour piercing rounds, that is your average penetration at 100 meters. And your armour piercing, you basically use it most of the time. The ammunition is very situational, the APCR etc, which we'll get into, but your armour piercing, your general rounds, they're normally quite cheap. The only time you don't really want to use armour piercing is if you've got one of the big derp guns like the SU-152, where the armour piercing on that, or the KV-2, tends to have a lot lower penetration because the shell is a slow velocity shell. The higher velocity shells generally have more penetration on your armour piercing, so with those derp guns you're better off looking at HE. Now armour piercing, it does lose penetration over distances, so the further away your target, the less penetration your shell will have when it gets there, because the more it's slowed down, and they normally have a white tracer round. So we'll move on to HE. Right, so HE rounds, high explosive. There's a lot, well, most of the tanks you'll find in the game have high explosive as a secondary ammunition. Not the premium, that's generally APCR or heat rounds, which we'll move on to shortly. Now with HE it has a yellow tracer round, and it doesn't lose penetration over distance, but it starts with a lot lower penetration. Basically it's high explosive. It's not designed excuse me, not designed for particularly going through armour, although it can be very damaging. If you hit a target it won't bounce, however it will explode, but if it doesn't penetrate you'll lose half of the damage, and then it also loses damage for every millimetre of armour that it has to pass through. But it also does do splash damage as well, so you don't necessarily have to hit the target if you hit close enough. And in the model viewer now it does actually have the splash radius for the HE, which is quite useful. Now high explosive, I always carry a couple, depending on the tank. Some I carry a little bit more than others. The KV-2 almost exclusively high explosive ammunition. The SU-152, sorry, again almost exclusively HE ammunition, because it does such a massive amount of damage that even if you don't penetrate you can still do maybe 300-400 damage with it. Now on your other tanks, where obviously it's not that sort of higher damage and it's a slightly lower penetration, I carry it for instances where I come up against lightly armoured targets, such as light tanks or things like the Rheinmetall Borsig, or artillery. And also it's very good for resetting the cap, because you don't actually have to do a lot of damage to reset the cap, just 1 point of damage will do it. So if you load a high explosive when you're racing up there and you just pop one off at it, you hit, that's it, cap reset, then you can switch to whichever ammunition you need for getting through whatever is sat in the cap circle. Now I think that about covers it. Yellow tracer round, yeah. Yeah, I'd say that about covers it. Like I say, I always carry a couple. I mean, if you get the side or the rear of something lightly armoured, then you can really put it through it. But that'll come with experience. Experience with your tank and experience with the other tanks in the game, knowing what you can and can't penetrate with your HE, because different vehicles with different caliber guns have different HE penetration. So you really have to learn the penetration for the tank you're in, learn the armour values of the tanks you're fighting against, and if you know you can penetrate the rear with your high explosive, put one in, because it does a lot of module damage and a lot of crew damage as well. Quite often, even if it doesn't penetrate, it can do a lot of module damage. So let's move on to some of the other sort of high explosive rounds, and we'll look at heat next. Right, I did say it'd be quick, so I'll speed it up a little bit. Heat, high explosive anti-tank, is a type of high explosive round. It's got a blue tracer, and it doesn't lose penetration over distance, which is quite good as an alternate sort of premium round like a PCR. It doesn't have splash, however, and it can bounce, and it is bad. Excuse me again. It is bad against sloped or spaced armor, so try to use it on something that's as flat as possible if you can. So moving on, we have HESH, another high explosive, and it's kind of like super high explosive. Not so much for the damage. It obviously does increase damage over AP and APCR and even heat rounds, like standard high explosive, but is generally a lot higher penetration. And as far as I'm aware, it's only available on high-tier British vehicles such as the Chieftain, the Conqueror and the FV215B. So whereas high explosive might have, say, 50 penetration, HESH for the Conqueror, for example, has an average of 120 penetration, and for the Chieftain has an average of 140 penetration. And again, same characteristics as your HE, so it has a yellow tracer, it doesn't lose penetration over distance, and it does have a splash. So again, same sort of scenario. If you've got the weaker side or rear of the vehicle, or if you really need to reset the cab and you're not sure you'll penetrate the distance, use a HESH round. But like I say, it has a lot higher penetration than standard HE. Right, so lastly but not least, we have APCR, or Armour Piercing Composite Rigid, which is pretty much the standard premium ammunition on most of the tanks in the game, and it's actually the standard ammunition on some of the higher tier tanks such as the Chieftain and I believe the Centurion Action X, although I could be wrong, and I think the T-71 actually uses APCR. Now it has a red tracer round, it's got a higher penetration than armour piercing, and it's kind of like super armour piercing, but it does the same damage, and it's the same sort of deal. Basically it'll hit. If it doesn't ricochet and actually penetrates, then it will do the damage that's within the damage range that you can see there on screen. Now it also has generally a higher muzzle velocity than armour piercing, which means that when you're shooting at moving targets, you'll have to put less lead time on the target because the shell will actually get there quicker, although it does lose penetration faster over large distances, so do take that into account. Now people might be thinking, well, why don't I just load up with APCR then and just fire those? And it's because you will run out of silver very, very quickly. It is generally quite expensive, and you're much better off trying to aim for weak spots on a vehicle than use your APCR, you know, and just spam away. Now the time that you really do want to use your APCR, it's for those instances. I mean, I use it personally for those instances where I need to pen. You know, if it's a case of I'm a one hit, they're a one hit, I want to make sure that I penetrate with that hit, so I'm going to give myself the best chance possible and load up a premium round if I can. Some people will call me a scrub lord, I call that smart thinking. Anyway, so that's the sort of time you want to use it. Again, if you're not carrying any HE or you've run out because you've been blasting light tanks to smithereens and artillery, then you could always load up an APCR just to make sure that you actually penetrate whatever's in the cap circle capping. But like I say, do beware because it can bounce, so you know, you still may have to aim your shot. But generally, like I say, they have a lot more penetration than your armour piercing, so it really is good for making sure that that shell goes in. Well, that's hopefully the basics of the ammunition covered, so I don't know if I've cleared anything up for anybody or just made you more confused, but let me know in the comments what you think, if I've missed anything out or if there's anything I need to cover in a bit more detail, and let me know how we go. It wasn't an easy thing to put together. Anyway, as promised, here's a bit of a fun match in the FCM 36 Pack 40 Tier 3 French Tank Destroyer. And before I go any further, I'd just like to say a big thank you to all my subscribers as well. We're now over 100, which is absolutely fantastic, so thank you very much, and hopefully the channel will continue to grow. Now the reason I'm in this is because it had occurred to me that I've not really covered any of the Tech Tree premiums, and I had a bit of gold lying around, So I thought I'd pick one of these up as a French crew trainer, because I don't really have a decent French crew trainer. And yeah, start to do some reviews of the Tech Tree Premium. So I shall be dipping my hand into my pocket, and hopefully over the next couple of months getting most of the Tech Tree Premiums and covering them and letting you guys know what they're like, because they're always there for sale. You can always buy them, and like I say, I've not really covered them apart from the Super Pershing and the FCM 50T, which are essentially, well, which are the Liberté and the Freedom, so I have covered those. Anyway, quite an interesting little tank destroyer. I'll give you a quick rundown of the stats. Right, it's got a nasty little gun on it, and I don't mean nasty for you, I mean nasty for whoever's on the receiving end. 15.92 rounds a minute, 98 pen on the standard ammunition, 110 damage, 126 on your premium, and 175 damage on your HE with 38 penetration, which is good enough really to wreck most things down at this tier. A 1.5 second aiming time, which is pretty damn good. 0.37 accuracy, and possibly -6 degrees of gun depression. Now, I say possibly, and I'll explain that in a minute. Goes 24 kilometers an hour, and well, it claims to go 24 kilometers an hour, and it does downhill with a good strong tailwind. Not got a particularly good engine. Now, traverse speed is quite good though, 37 degrees a second. 400 meter view range, which is pretty damn good. And the armour, well, not quite the whole story. It says 40mm on the front, 20 on the sides and 40 on the rear, but that is just on the hull. The gun shield is somewhere between 1 and 20mm, and it's a damn big gun shield. So that whole boxy bit on top is very thin armour, but it is a very potent little tank destroyer. Now, I said possibly -6 degrees because it's been brought to my attention that some of my gun depression stats are wrong. And it turns out that the World of Tanks companion app that I get them from has some wrong stats in it. So the Conqueror only has -7, not the -11 that I was led to believe. So I've got to go through all my videos over the next week or so and make sure that I've got the right gun stats, and if I haven't, put some subtitles up. But anyway, yeah, you can see, fantastic little thing. This is my very first match in it. I've got no equipment on it and a crew with no skills. This is one overpowered little tank destroyer. I mean, you can claim it's not because of the armour, but it reminds me of a sort of tier 3 T28 prototype. And as you can see there, I one or two shotted most of the things that I went for, and ended up with 8 kills on my first time out, so not a bad round. Just over 1,000 damage done, so I got a high caliber out of that, demolition expert, top gun, and a second class mastery. Anyway, like I say, I hope this ammo guide has been helpful to people, and if not, let me know in the comments and tell me what I've missed or what I've screwed up on, because I've probably made a cock up somewhere. Anyway, yeah, as always, I'll be back tomorrow with hopefully a full-on review of the FCM 36 Pack 40. So, yeah, take care out there, and I'll catch you next time. See you later.